2 of Histo Help, NSH's popular podcast that brings tips, tricks, and advice on all those pesky problems you're facing in the lab. Season 1 was a huge hit, and this season is going to keep the good times rolling. We will be chatting with Histo legends like Cliff Chapman and Mary Buell, Dave Krull, our unofficial guru on tech, industry partner, and maybe your new best friend when it comes to equipment know-how, Matt Mincer, and NSH members Lynn Grumman and Candace Smoots, whose sound, tips, and advice will really help your lab maintain those high standards. So sit back for a few minutes and enjoy. Hi, this is Connie, and I am with Robin Fitzel, NSH volunteer extraordinaire, lab webinar superstar, and sometimes my best friend when it comes to getting good content and information. And it's why I've asked her to be on today's episode of Histo Talks, where we're going to have a little chit about chatter. I just came up with that. I'm very brilliant. So welcome, Robin. And let me go ahead and just ask you that very important question. What is chatter?
Connie, thank you so much for that elaborate introduction. Chatter to me is the same thing we used to identify as Venetian blind, right? Look of a section. And so it's that alternating look to a section where you have light and dark staining, and it might be more visible with tissue that is more dense, like uterus or bone. And so that is what it is.
What tends to cause chatter? So I'm recognizing it in my slide. What should I be thinking about as far as what the cause might have been?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind from me is the angle of the blade. I would be sure that if the angle is set, and every instrument is different with it when it comes to microtomes, but you might want to adjust that if you feel like that might be the root cause. Also, too, to make sure the blade is tight, which you would see more other issues if it was loose, but it certainly could be a cause. Another thing that comes to mind is that maybe your block holder maybe needs to be tightened a little bit, maybe in the holder of the clamp itself where you set the block in. Another culprit that comes to mind is the type of tissue, of course, especially bone. If it's not decalced all the way and you're trying to get that section and there's some areas that may be undecalcified, certainly it's going to give you some resistance and cause that. Mm-hmm.
I check for the tightness of the blade. I check for the angle of the blade. I check the block holder. And then, of course, I'm factoring in tissue type. Dullness of the blade, is that something else to look for that might be a cause? Absolutely. Or no, totally different?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely could be. Also, the speed at which you're turning. If you're cranking the wheel really fast, certainly on dense tissue, that can cause some problems. Yeah.
Okay, that's a great tip. Definitely, again, going back to what you were saying before, tissue type certainly is going to have an impact. And you're right. So if you're that cranking of the blade, if it doesn't match the tissue type respectively, then you could end up with that problem of chatter or Venetian blinds. So those are ways to those are potential causes, ways to troubleshoot. Is there anything else that I should think about post recognizing this as a problem? Anything I can do with that tissue after I've recognized it as a problem?
A lot of times with bone or things that need to be decalcified, we actually have, usually by our station, people use different things. They either decal it on the face after they've faced it off, and they'll put it in some decal. I know some people use ammonia, I've heard in the field, and even I've run into accounts where people actually use dish soap, but they have certain brands that they use. So that's probably not in the textbook.
Yeah, but definitely something maybe to post up on the block, the member community, and say, hey, who's using dish soap for their chatter? And see what kind, get some brand recommendations. All right, so the other thing I want to ask you.
No endorsements.
No endorsements. What is if I'm looking to identify, I'm identifying chatter, like you mentioned, it has that Venetian blind look. What's the difference between recognizing a wrinkle and a chatter?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it is that with the chatter of Venetian blinds, you're getting a pattern where it's light and dark, light and dark. With wrinkles, they can happen anywhere in the section, and usually there's just a couple, hopefully.
Yeah.
That's another conversation, but we'll talk about that. But yeah, and you'll see with wrinkles, you'll see a sharp demarcation, a line across where it's really darkly stained. And if you look at, on a higher power, you'll see, that it's more cell layers. And so that tells you, and because it's not a pattern, it's just happening randomly in one or two spots or through, even if there's several of them, you'll see that sharp demarcation. They don't necessarily have to be in line or parallel. And so that's the difference between those two usually.
Awesome. Is there anything I'm not thinking about in regards to chatter that is worth mentioning?
Well, I would think if I could speak to wrinkles,
sure.
Usually you want to check to the temperature of your water bath, right? But one little trick that I was taught years ago was that we would actually keep a jar of about 40% alcohol. And if the section was really difficult to get thin, especially like lymph nodes when you're cutting them at 2 or 3 microns, kidney biopsies, we would lay that section on a little water bath that had the 40% alcohol, and then we would place that back into our water bath. And difference in the chemical compositions, of course, would cause some turgor, and that section would just spread out beautifully. So
nice.
Yeah, it's a nice little trick. I think some people know about it. I'm not the only one. I know I don't have the market on that, but yeah, it might help.
That's awesome.
If I do, send the payment to RA.
Yeah, right. Don't worry. You can make all checks payable to Robin Fitzel. So I guess on that note, I just want to say thank you for again being my source on all things histo. Welcome. You are a self-described histo nerd, and I appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you have a tip, trick, or piece of knowledge you'd like to share, let us know. We would love to feature you on a future episode of Histo Help. Have a great day.